They live in a neighborhood that's been targeted for that kind of industry.
History, the field slave, house slave dynamic. They purposely took some of the slaves out of the field. They got like a little bit more privilege over the ones who were in the field. And so that was so that they could employ, divide, and conquer. This is how they turn Black folks against the LGBTQ community, and how there's this notion that...
I mean, you obviously have pockets of intelligence.
My life.
People of faith, people of conscience, what are we called to do? At this moment in our nation's history, what does our faith and conscience demand of us? With race, our relentless punitive impulse, the recurring impulse to punish and control poor people and people of color rather than view them as worthy of care, compassion, and concern. What we face is a profound moral and spiritual crisis, not merely a failure of God or the spirits of my ancestors were trying to send me a message that all sound and fury but signifying nothing. We need creative, determined, inspired policymakers who are capable of imagining alternatives and designing meaningful alternatives to the status quo. Do not look to the policymakers to define a vision of what the beloved community might look like once the walls of Jericho come tumbling down. Indeed, it now seems fair to say that the future of American democracy rests on whether we as a people ultimately rise to the challenge that this multiracial, multi-ethnic experiment in democracy presents, and find a way to care for each other, genuinely care for each other, across the innumerable lines of race, class, ethnicity, and difference.
Yeah, black don't crack, matter of fact, where the fuck 40 acres at?
Where do you get any hope that this ideal of compassion, that we can create a society,
improve society,
such as you describe, given our conflicted, often savage past?
Fearlessness and a determination that honors your most sacred beliefs and moral commitments.
We have to stop echoing our oppressors. Those of us who have to experience multiple forms of oppression simultaneously end up taking on this labor because it's life and death for us.
It's taxes and likes on social media.
Prison corporations, are seeking to influence politicians to pass more criminalizing laws that will fill the beds and make more money. Just because the system wants to grow in any direction.
A new Jim Crow had been born. The war mentality, the us versus them, search and destroy, lock them up and throw away the key, has decimated communities of color, and how our legal system has conspired to keep millions cycling in and out of prison for the rest of their lives. Stand with the despised, the accused, the convicted, the least of these.
And you'll never become all that you can be, because you can't deal with the conflicts you have inside of you.
We will fight on.
We must be good stewards of this existence. Being a human being is a gift.
We need you, students of morality and students of theology, to speak your truth so that we might all muster the courage to do the same. Hate, abhor, hate speech.
Silence!
We must, absolutely must, value the First Amendment right to say anything to anyone, anywhere. That First Amendment right must be deemed inviolate. Talking over one another, interrupting anyone.
I can't take this.
Reaffirming the First Amendment. If we are serious about breaking our nation's habit of creating massive systems of racial and social control, if we are serious about rising to the challenge that this paradox of America presents, then people of faith and people of conscience are going to need to step up in a big way and show tremendous courage, speak unpopular and inconvenient truths,
birth mortality rate and dying during pregnancy,
and offer a vision for justice that transcends the politics of power and privilege. And so perhaps it should come as no surprise that a vicious backlash against the civil rights movement manifesting as law and order and a get tough movement.
At the core of this internal problem of America is the unwanted presence of nearly 30 to 40 million black people who didn't come on the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria, or the Mayflower.
Combined with the economic collapse of inner city communities across America, led to the birth of a penal system unlike anything the world had ever seen.
I dragged Prince.
Loving you is easy cause you're beautiful. Reggie?
So it's the folks that are black and brown, but now that they've arrived, I'm not like them. They're working really hard to assimilate into these systems of whiteness that are steeped in anti-blackness. And so then they echo the oppressor. A beneficiary of genocide and slavery is anybody who gets to lick up the crumbs that fall from the table of white supremacy in exchange for their cooperation.
What are legal structures doing to us, and how do we actually resolve material conditions?
There is no way you can go where others have not gone and not find debris and obstacles in the way. If you're a leader, now if you're a follower, you don't have to listen to this. Whoever you're following will clear a path for you. Need to be accepted becomes more powerful than your need to go and do something fresh. You will backtrack. You will just moonwalk like Michael Jackson, going all the way back into the safety zone. And whether you know it or not, you are imprisoned by fear. How many trailblazers do I have in here?
So why do you walk and talk and act the way you do?
Who was Adolf Hitler's propaganda minister? A psychologist by the name of Joseph Goebbels. Go to South Africa. Who engineered the apartheid regime? A white psychologist. Come to America. Who engineered and justified separate but equal and black inferiority and white superiority? It was psychologist Henry H. Goddard at the top of that list. And
the boy is dressed as a girl.
I can see. I'm just a boy in a dress.
Transphobia is indoctrination, and it is a form of white supremacy. Any form of body terrorism, whether it is shaming the color of our skin, the complexion of that skin, the size of our bodies.
Let's get the few most charismatic people who look the most like what society already thinks are good people. Perhaps we, will make an advance for everyone.
What our body's original states were in, any of those things, they are forms of body terrorism and they are forms of anti-blackness.
Sometimes certain kinds of visible inclusion practices don't result in material gains. To say that racism and ableism and sexism are illegal, and yet you've seen the actual conditions of racialized violence and of the growing apparatuses of criminalization worsen. You've seen the wealth gap worsen.
On a national average, the LGBTQ community has a spending power of over $917 billion, and it's now actually over $1 trillion. Globally, we have a $3.7 trillion spending power.
Putting your hours for the powers that have always been.
Black trans women, on a national average, we make less than $10,000 a year.
If you solve the problem for people who are the least vulnerable of the vulnerable, usually you end up mobilizing ideas that actually further the stigma of those who are considered outside or not good enough.